Afternoon, everyone. So we're here to talk about the orc changes. So the points update just got released. We aren't going to go over all the other armies. I might do some collaboration in the future, but for right now, we're going to talk about the orcs and goblin changes and the magic changes since they do affect orcs and goblins as well. And obviously, there's going to be meta changes in some ways with different armies getting different abilities and points going down. So we'll talk about that a little bit and maybe how it'll affect orcs. So here's the orc book, the new one. We're going to go straight to the bottom and just talk about the changes and kind of what it means, or at least from my opinion, what it means for orcs. And we'll kind of extrapolate from there. So Maz's Zappenbow, 55 to 50. Unfortunately, this doesn't hit the 45 mark, which I believe would make it very interesting because there's a combo where you take Crown of Autocracy, Crown of the Cavern King, and this bow, and you put so now you have a Goblin King that has Leadership 9 at 18-inch range. And you can do that now, but I thought, which I've seen people do, and it's pretty cool, 18-inch Leadership 9 for orcs is a really big bubble. And you can take a BSB idol and have double 18-inch bubble if you want. And the only other way to do that is to do a Crown of the Cavern King BSB with a Wyvern General is the other way you can get it done. But I thought, if you're going to put him in like a unit of skirmishing Forest Goblins, which help get the bubble, move it around where you need to go, then if you had Maz's Zappenbow, whatever, then now you have 20 archers. They can move and shoot. The bow itself is 3 strength, 4 shots on a poison guy because he'd be a Forest Goblin. No, you wouldn't make him a Forest Goblin, actually, because it's too many points. Point being is, it's a cool item. It doesn't fit into my builds, but whatever. Goblin King mounts. The Huntsman Spider went up 10, and the Gargantua went up 10. Fair. It's definitely the best mounts. For the Spider Kings, I run a Spider King, a cheap one or a good one, and we'll talk about, actually at the end of this video, I'll go over my new list that I've been trying, and I have known about some of these updates for a while, so I had a good guess of what my new list would be, and I have played it, but we'll go over that at the end. I don't think this is going to drastically change anything. If you were taking Gargantua, if you're taking Huntsman Spider, 10 points is not the end of the world. Goblin Witch Doctor Master went down 10 again. Not the end of the world, it's a good thing for us, but it's kind of like an offset of the Goblin Gargantua thing, in my opinion. To be fair, orcs did not receive a lot of heavy-handed changes, in my opinion. They're just kind of in the middle. They're kind of middle of the road. Not even middle of the road. I don't want to say that, like, as far as power-wise, but they're just kind of a nicely internally balanced book. And so they didn't feel the need to make any drastic changes to it. And whether that's good or bad, I'm not sure. I actually am more excited for how armies around orcs are going to change, because I feel like orcs have, like I said, really good internal balance to the point where if the meta shifts one way or the other, I do think they have the tools to compete with different builds, because they have a lot of, different things that do armor piercing or hit a lot of models, or they have a lot of ranks, or, they just have a lot of things. So I don't think these changes are drastically going to change builds, but I think they'll make a couple tweaks. Maybe you choose this over that, but more so it will be how do other things affect everything. Like, how do other armies changing? But we'll still go through the changes here. Orc Additional Models are 9 points. Feral Orcs went up 4. So now a unit of 20 Orcs is 20 points more expensive for Feral Orcs, while anything bigger than that is the same price. Ed Bashers, the same type of thing. If you went normal Ed Bashers, it's 1 point per model less for extra ones, and then it's offset by the Feral going up. So any Feral core is going up 20 if it's non-Ed Bashers, 15 if it's Ed Bashers. Do note that all command went down to 10 points across the board for every army. Big changes. It definitely helps some units more than others. Helps you fit in those extra champions, those standards that maybe you didn't buy before, because now it's so cheap. For 20 points, sometimes you just didn't want to buy standard on a unit. And now, for 10 points, why not throw it in? An extra combat res is never bad. Goblin, Shady, I don't know. I don't take Shady Gets. I think one of the biggest changes is the Goblin Cave Goblin Nets going 2-1. So one thing, they were 2 points before. So if you're taking Cave Goblins, you're almost 100% taking them for Mad Gits. If you're not taking Mad Gits, then there's no reason to take Cave Goblins unless you're taking Nets. But Nets were super expensive. I mean, a 45-man unit was paying 90 points for Nets. That's a lot of points for Nets. And now it's 45 points. And Nets are pretty dirty, in my opinion. Not only... So you can net yourself, which sucks, but it's not a huge deal if you net your own goblins. Your strength 2, you're not killing a lot of things anyway. So you're saying 2+, you're going to make your enemy -1 strength and -1 AP. That's a big deal. That's a spell, right? That's basically getting a spell off on 2+ for 45 points. And the fact that it comes on such a large unit, it makes them a lot harder to grind down. And they're not as free combat res as they used to be. They are parry with -1 strength. So if you go into something like, I don't know, Elf Spearmen, let's just fuck it, whatever. You're fighting Elf Spearmen. They're going from, they need 3+, 5+. If you get this spell off, if you get this off first, 3+, 5+ is not that bad. You don't kill a ton of goblins with that. The nice part is it also combos well with some of the other things in the army. Not really Great Green Idols because they're Resilient 8, but, that Spider Hero. If the Spider Hero is joined to them and you take the Hero's Heart version, well, he can't be affected by the nets because Hero's Heart's always at least Strength 3, or Strength 5, AP 3. But also, the Spider is, but who gives a fuck if the Spider is -1? But also, if you're a Strength 6 character, you're now Strength 5, so that 1-up rollable saves goes a lot farther, potentially. Chariots, the Orc Warlord, it just helps, it's just annoying, right? For the enemy to go -1 strength, coupled with maybe something like Smite. So example would be Smite the Unbeliever. You can minus somebody's strength and then net them and they're -2. Something like a Giant or, any Strength 5 stomping monster now stomps on a 3+ instead of a 2+. That's a big deal too, for winning combats and surviving longer. I actually think it's much better than it's annoying for 45 points, and it's kind of like a built-in I don't know, it's like a synergistic buff to have in your army at some point. If you combo charge with Boar Boys with the 2+ save, and now all of a sudden the enemy goes from strength 4 to strength 3, you still get your 2+ save. It's like a double deal. So I really do like that nets went down, and my new list does have net units in it. Iron Orc Additional Models, sure, 24 points, 1 here. I don't know why Goblin with Chariots went up. The unit of 3 went up 15 points. I already said in another video I'm dropping that damn unit because I don't like it. So now, if you compare it to an Orc Chariot, it's 15 points difference, and it's faster, yet it's weaker, and it has more leadership troubles. And I don't even know if I love my Orc Chariot, though I am taking some. So I'm over the Wolf Chariots for now. I don't know why they went up. I think they were good, but I don't know. Nah. I don't care. Nash Dashes went down. Again, is this going to change the world? No. Starting Herd going up 10? No. It's fine. I don't take Nashers right now. I want to try them one day. But again, this isn't going to break the bank. None of these changes, the biggest change is the nets, in my opinion, because you're probably taking them on a 30+ man Goblin unit, so you're saving 30 to 45 points. And trolls are a big drop too. Everything else is really small. If you take 2 idols, you're paying 10 more points. If you're taking Spider Hero, you're taking 10 more points. But it's counteracted by by the master change potentially, and a lot of it's going to be counteracted by a little bit of standards and stuff that you had in your army anyway. So all that changing will be pretty nice. The troll change is interesting. So now, they're going to 60 points for extra models, and they're going 5 points for bridge trolls. So you're talking about a 6-man unit of trolls going down. A 6-man bridge is -18, -15, is -33 points. That's a big change. And the bigger you get, it's -8 points per model after that. So 8 bridge trolls. And I thought bridge troll, and okay, we'll talk about, these went down. Doesn't matter the quick right now. So if I want to focus on trolls quickly. I guess this is immediate after rally. Okay. I think before there was some debate between cave and bridge. You know, it was 8 points versus 13 points. It was 5 points more. You get an MR3, which is fine, and armor is pretty good. I think people underestimate how good distracting is because against anything like strength 5 or more, bridge was just better because the -1 to hit was better than the 6-up save. If you're a high strength, that's always better. Um, what I mean is for 8 points a model, I think it's very clear that bridge is probably the better choice. Another thing nice is Strider Water. People don't appreciate that either because trolls like to be in water because it turns off flaming. But the other side is, you're not steadfast if you're in water. But now the trolls are, which can be a big deal if you're fighting like a monster in there. But even more big a deal is if you bring an enemy unit into the water. If you're sitting in the water just being a troll, if they come and try to fight you, they're potentially going to lose combat and not be steadfast either. So it's kind of it's a nice dynamic there that's kind of interesting. But I mean, 6 bridge trolls is like 375, and trolls are annoying. They are on my list. I am trying them out. Yeah, that's all the changes for orcs. Not much. I don't think anything is blowing up the world. I think the nets are the biggest change, followed by the trolls. Everything else is kind of like you can make it work. None of your orc lists are getting destroyed. The 10-point command is going to free up a good bit of points and actually will help orc core a lot because orc core is heavily infantry based. And so a lot of units had command. So I mean, my orc core right now has 77 command in it, just in core. So you're getting about 70 points there. The core setup I'm going to show you in New Recruit, which isn't all the way updated for orcs yet. They have some things that aren't aligned, and I'll walk through that. Is probably like 100 points. I saved 150 points, almost. Like if this was the old book, it would be like 150 point more in core. And now I'm like 5 points above min, so it's pretty sweet. Now, to be fair, as far as the meta is concerned and other armies, a lot of armies are getting some changes here and there. Some monsters going up, some things going down. So we're going to have to see how lists evolve and, should this orc list evolve with the meta and what kind of things might become better. Will some of the war machines become better? But, everybody's getting the command change. So you're going to see something where this phenomenon and you're going to make a list and you're going to be like, oh, they didn't nerf my demons much because I saved all this points on command and it went. But you gotta remember all the other armies that didn't get nerfed hard are getting like 80 points in command unless you're Spanish and you're getting like 10 points because they never bought musicians. So I think you gotta think of it that way. Like you can look at an individual list and say, oh, it all washed out. The command changes counteracted these point changes. But you gotta remember that the person next to you is getting maybe 80 points more, or 100 points more because of all the command changes and their buffs. So we'll definitely have to see what shakes out of it. I do think that if I'll give you my broadly painted brush, I don't think there was as many nerfs as people thought. I don't think things were hit as hard. Warriors were probably hit the hardest. I thought demons and DS were hit a little light, in my opinion, on some of the parts. I thought warriors were hit pretty hard, but they're still survivable. You can still take a lot of the same stuff you were taking before. Maybe you sacrifice a command here or there, or maybe a chaff unit here or there. And you can still kind of fit the same shit in, to be honest with you. So maybe we'll see if that actually sparks like a big change or not. I think things like Furion's High Elf list got hit kind of hard because the hero points were already capped, and now that because all the things went up, it's like 75 points over heroes. So I think things being like over hero points or over monster points, or those are the kind of changes that really drive lists. Sometimes it's just I have to drop a dog unit and I can keep my same list, and then you have to reassess like if the average warriors list, really good top tier army, has to drop a chaff unit, but we'll say orcs, for example, we'll say mid-tier, but I don't think they're mid-tier. I think they're better than that. Let's say orcs, I gain a chaff unit and nets. Then that's two offsetting things that kind of say, okay, does that bridge the gap of, how good everything was? And I don't know the answer to that. So that's the orc changes. Again, nothing to write home about. Nothing I think is going to change the world, except maybe we'll see nets more and maybe more trolls. The the magic changes. So there were several magic changes. We'll actually go through all of them real quick just to see if they have any impact on orcs. So Silver Spike went to the 4 spell, Molten Copper went to the 6 spell, and the D3 wounds was lost off of the extra hits. So this is actually, I would say this is probably worse for orcs, like at least for the army I play, because Silver Spike is a better spell versus my army than Molten Copper. I already have the fire save on my one spider hero, and actually the spike is actually really annoying. I actually think this was a buff to alchemy. I don't think Molten Copper was that special. I actually think it's a pretty crappy 6 spell. Maybe if you have an alchemy master, there's no change except Silver Spike being worse with the D3. It's strength 4 for all the hits, which is nice. So like Veilwalker Alchemy Warriors Dark Gods is not as good against ogres because you used to be able to do the strength 3 hit and D3 wounds for all the hits and rerolled a wound, so that was super nice. Yeah, not a big change for this. The +2 offense, -2 offense doesn't really matter. This going to a 9+ probably is on the worst side for orcs because the hit everybody in a unit spell is really nice versus giant goblin units. Of course, it's not the end of the world if you're using them for like fanatics and nets. Like you just have to accept you're going to lose 20 models when it hits you, so maybe dispel it. Though it's a 9+, it makes it easier to cast, but it's not the game-ending thing. Warden of Doom becoming better is not better. Okay, this doesn't matter. This helps orcs, I think, a good bit. I think the snipe going down to 18 inches on the focus version is really nice, especially because, I take the 18-inch BSB, and he's 2 wounds. He sits in the back of the army. He's like leadership 9 at best if I'm near my general. So just being able to not have that reach to kind of get to him or having to commit farther up to get to him will be really nice. Breath getting worse is good for orcs. It's just a really good spell. This going to a hex is whatever. So Pyro actually affects orcs because not only can they take Pyro, but it's decent against them. So Scorching Salvo going to number 2 is going to be interesting if Adepts become more popular, trying to do like the AoE spells. It's okay and I'm thinking of it from terms of my particular orc army because it's just easier that way. It's pretty good versus my orcs. It's not really. I have a lot of things that are just like toughness 5 or 4, you know what I mean? Like it's gonna do like maybe a wound. It's still a good spell. The new spell is interesting. It's really nice. Minus defensive skill. Not really good against my army, but 24 and only a 5+. The 8+ minus agility could help orcs a lot because we have low agility. It is a little bit short range. A 12-inch range on a spell is not easy to do. It's hard enough to get 18-inch hexes. I mean, it's a hex. So the thing with hexes and buffs, right? If you have a unit, let's say my goblin unit is fighting another unit. If I'm behind my goblin unit and it's a buff, I probably have 4 to 6 inches of goblins to cast on, while the enemy would be 4 to 6 inches farther from me. So getting a 12-inch hex off is not easy. 24 is a lot easier to do. I don't know if this is going to change my view on taking Pyro and orcs or not. The spell is nice. It's a nice combat spell to have for orcs. It's basically +1 to hit against a lot of things because they kind of sit around that 3 to 4 offensive. And so, if you're going against a 3 to 4 defensive with a 5+ save, it's going to go down to 2. And maybe if you're probably not even getting +2 to hit because the only way to hit on 2 up would have to be 1 versus is 0 the min? I think 1's the min. So it'd be 1 versus, I don't know. It is funny that you can make people attack at the same time as great weapons. So, like, if you had great weapon black orcs, you could make the enemy attack at the same time. But still, 12 is so short. It's fine. I mean, you lost a spell that was cascading fire, the other spell you didn't really need. I could see orcs taking an adept pyro still. I don't know. I think we might be more impacted by people taking pyromancy more. and we'll talk about that. So Break the Spirit went up 1. It's actually a decent deal, though I cast on 3 dice a lot of the times, so it doesn't really change the math that much. It makes it just enough that it could fail a little more. Savage Fury being 12/24 is whatever to me. Thom, Speaking Tongues went down. I never take it. It has some funny uses, maybe if they have trolls or something. I think I should take it more, just to be annoying. Like, there are times where it is actually kind of annoying. I'm not sure. Like, I'm trying to think of times where in my army maybe it would be useful. Maybe if, like, you're going to force a panic check with, like, Fanatics or something, or even just BSB checks. There are times it can be useful. The problem is, like, if the enemy stays back, it's not that useful. It's also, again, 18-inch hex. 18 inches is very hard to get off on somebody. It's just not easy to do. So we'll see if it becomes more popular. Ravenswing. So this is went down to 18. Good spell for orcs. Going down to 18 probably isn't the end of the world for them. They got to keep pretty tight for leadership anyway, so they weren't really super far out there. The biggest change is number 6 going to the old Dark Elf H spell. So we get 8+ reroll to wound and a 12-up reroll to wound with shooting. I think it's going to be looked at as, oh my god, everybody gets this 12+ reroll to wound. First off, 12-up is really high to cast. It's a comet. Also, reroll to wound is not that much better than something like Thom's -1 for a 9-up. So you're saving a die or 2 potentially. Probably 2 dice, because this is like, on 4 dice, this is not even that, like, it can still go off. Its averages goes off, but it's, like, still risky. It's also 18 inches, which, again, these armies that are very shooty, like, the mage is not always going to be up there to do it to the unit you want to do it to, I guess is what I'm saying. So, it's fine. I just think it's a little... It might be better that it looks better than it is in practice. Reroll to wound is great, sure. It's it's just a worse version of the Evo spell. Sure, it affects everybody who's fighting that unit, and it has some benefits for orcs, because just like their H spell being reroll to hit. Yes, it's very good. I don't know if it's good enough that I would take this lore personally. So, I know for me, in my particular build, because I go single Goblin Mage, I don't think Pyro or Witchcraft is better than Solo Thom. But if I went for an Adept, I could see like a Witchcraft Master, Pyro Adept, or vice versa. We'll see. It's something to experiment with, I would say. I don't think any of the item changes affect orcs that much. Maybe Legion Banner going to 10 points is pretty interesting. If you're taking big goblins with the Fanatics, you're taking Relentless. But I could see it being so cheap now. There's units before you didn't take banners on, and now if you're going to take like 40 orcs, right? Like 40 orcs with Legion Banner is like -20. Like a full command 40-man orc unit with shields and Legion Banner is 70 points less than it was before. And you get 4 ranks in a huge unit. There's some nice things there. So we're actually going to go and talk about my new list. Kingslayer being on foot only kind of hurts orcs. So it was kind of cool to put it on an orc hero, on a chariot, or on a boar. It was actually fairly strong. So let's talk about my current orc list. So I will tell you right now that new recruit is not fully functional for orcs yet. There are some point irregularities. But this is my current build. And I played it, this version, I think, 3 times. But I had a very similar version where I think the trolls were an extra chariot and another goblin king on a spider. And I played that a bunch of times. And I mean, I played versus top ETC players with it, and it's performed very well. Several big wins, several small wins, and 2 losses. Not even huge losses. And probably only one of them. I probably could have won the other game if I played better. It wasn't a list fall. And the other one was I probably could have just stayed in a corner and got a 10 because it was a very hard matchup to run out in. But that's here nor there. That happens with every army. So let's just go through the army, and I'll kind of walk through what it does and And I think to note, anyone who watches my video should know this, that I'm a fairly aggressive player. I have been a little more patient with orcs, I will say. But I like to fight things. I like to combo charge things. I don't like to sit. I don't take war machines very often. I don't really like it. I like to be more efficient with magic. I don't like spending a ton of points on magic. I like to have some tricks here and there. So, we'll start with the Pharaoh Orc Warlord on a boar. So he has 3 up, 5 up, toughness 6, Omen Apocalypse. The good and bad about this guy. Good, he hits like a truck. The bad side is, and he's not that expensive. 510 isn't too bad. The bad side is, he is your everything in this list. Without him, your goblin units are leadership 5, your trolls are leadership 4, and so he's the one that I got to keep testing. He's the one where it's like, if he's gonna die, if he dies, it just screws everything. So I have to be a little safer with him, but I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if he should be like an Iron Orc with like a 1 up, 5 up that kind of, it's the same thing, but you kind of take some of his risk away because you don't have Frenzy, but you don't have Battle Focus. But maybe that's okay. For 35 points, he could be Toughness 5, 1 up, 5 up, which is a lot safer versus like random things hitting him. Sure, Resilience 6 is really nice, but the 1 up save I think is going to be better in most cases than Resilience 6. Also, not being frenzy and having to charge off is also really good. So, given how focused he is on the center of the army and how much my army needs his leadership, there is something to be said for should he be, a black orc or even a normal orc, because a normal orc can get the save too, right? 5 up, heavy armor, boar, shield. You need to buy an armor item, but even a normal orc, let's just look at it real quick. If he was a normal orc, you save 60 points there. You take a war boar, you take a shield. You only get heavy armor. I mean, none of these are good. The problem is, like, you don't want to take basalt because your other guy has it. So it kind of gets a little worse because you're going to have to take the talisman of shielding too. Yeah, it kind of sucks. Kind of feels bad. Yeah, I don't like that one. I kind of like the Black Orc one, but it's so many more points. I mean, it's a good bit more, right? It's like 35 more points? Yeah, it's 35 more points for this version. So for 35 points, you lose Battle Focus and Resilience 6, but gain a 1-up save. I've seen people do the 1-up rollable save version too, but the Spider has the 1-up rollable save. So it kind of messes with the whole flow to change this guy up. So for right now, I'm keeping him as is. But he's to play this army is kind of tough, I will say, for this part of it. It can be real tough. Witch Doctor, nothing to see here. This guy's 20 points more expensive than he should be. He should be 460. So this list is 493 points over, but the command changes weren't updated for orcs, and there's 9 commands, so that's 90 points. This guy's 20 points over, so that's 110, and the trolls are too cheap. So this should be 498 when it's official. It's all you. 5 spells, Binding Scroll. I managed to fit in a Binding Scroll, which I didn't have before, and I think it's a very good change. I think it's very important for orcs. There's a lot of times where I'm just like, I wish I had a Binding Scroll this turn so I could guarantee this buff didn't go off, or guarantee that he didn't, like, if there's 2 good spells versus my idols, or my Goblin King is out in the open, I can guarantee the spell doesn't go off. It's really nice. Forrest Goblin King. This is the build I've been using for a long time. I think it's a super strong build. It's one of the best 1-up rollable save heroes I think out there. He has 5 strength 5 attacks to poison, 3 strength 4 on his mount. He 1-up rollable save. He can Vanguard with the thing below. He's just a very strong model for 355. He feels like a hunter. He works well with 18-inch bubble leadership because you just need that little bit extra range to kind of keep him if he's going off and doing his own thing. Very strong hero, plus 10 points. I'm not worried about it. Goblin Chief, Crown of the Cavern King. sets up for some shenanigans with vanguarding night goblins, which is cool and all, but honestly, it's more about the 18-inch bubble leadership. The way this army plays, or BSB, you need these bubble leaderships and BSBs, and it really does help to have this item. That being said, like you could do like a Great King Idol BSB, and you could do like an 18-inch general of some way. Like the Orc Warlord could be on a Wyvern and be more defensive, and there is something to be said about that. I think the way my Orc Wyvern plays, he is kind of there's a little bit of defense to him. Like he has to be, he's super strong when he charges and he does his thing, but you kind of have to be a little cagey with him because you need the leadership. So maybe there is something to be said of, and maybe I don't know if Wyvern is the right answer, but maybe there is something to be said of doing a safer build, maybe a cheaper. Maybe not going Omen of Apocalypse. Now, I really like Omen of Apocalypse because sometimes you just go in and do 7 strengths, 9 attacks, and kill something off the bat. But I'd be curious if you can go a safer Black Orc version who still has a good save, like and a good weapon, like a great weapon or something. Maybe you go great weapon and then 1-up, 4-up, and just be tanky and say, all right, well, I'm going to get my leadership. I don't have to frenzy off. That's something to consider in the future. Anyway, these go well together because I took a second Goblin King that had like a 1-up save and a lance. And then if you start, you can do things where you go, I don't know, they just get very expensive. Like you can do a 1-up, 4-up with paired weapon shield breaker or something, or just normal shield breaker. And I don't know, it just doesn't feel as good for the points. They're kind of expensive builds. I just feel like they're kind of bad versus bolt throwers and like alchemy magic, or at least the other one is. So there's a point where, and I took one with Ghostly Guard, and I wasn't a huge fan of it because he can't hide, and so he was bad against like little magic missiles. I just think one is very strong. The second ones are pretty good, but for the points, other things might be better. Does that make sense? Like, so the 250 point version is 100 points less than this guy, but I think this guy is more than 100 points better. Does that make sense? So this guy's like the prime value for the Goblin King build. And then the next one down is pretty good. And then it kind of, it just goes down from there. The Goblin Chief, again, I said why I took him. 18 BSB is key. Core, big ass. This unit is 30 points over. So my core right now should be 1130 because I have 7 commands that haven't been dropped yet. So it's 2 units of goblins, 5 fanatics, relentless company, full commands, nets. So nets are the things I'm trying. I've really liked them so far. Again, anything strength 4 or 5, that -1 can be really big. You take a lot less wounds. It's a lot harder to grind through 30, 45 goblins. And it also helps, because it's not just people attacking them. It's people attacking anyone in the combat. So if they come in and do a little clip and they're fighting something else, it's a big deal if trolls are -1 to wound, right? I mean, -1 AP potentially on other things. So 2 units there. Forrest Goblins, I take the skirmishing ones with banners of discipline. This is so the BSB. 1, you're not taking random leadership 9 checks, random panic checks on a unit with your BSB and mage in it, but also because you don't have to, your general can be a little more forward, still getting in your big units, and you don't have to worry about your bunker in the back needing his leadership for panic checks. So Standard Discipline's an easy buy here, I think. And I've really enjoyed the skirmishing version. Unfortunately, on UB, the gaps need to be fixed, and so my unit's a bit bigger on Universal Battle than it would be in real life, which makes it harder to manage, like move around a little, especially when you're 20 big. You're probably talking about, it's 5.5 millimeters, 5 gaps. You're probably talking almost an inch too big left to right and depth, which takes, Anyway, just being able to move laterally and get out of the way is pretty sweet. And there's times where being stubborn in the woods is really good if you need to run in the woods and just turn your rear to somebody and be stubborn for a while. It's pretty nice. And really, it doesn't score, but I mean, this unit is not winning any objectives. You're not getting across the board with it and breakthrough. It's not going to win you hold the center. If it's up that far, your whole army must be pushing the whole enemy off. So yeah, it is hard to score with this army. I mean, I've won scenarios with it, but you got to be very careful with it. Uh, so special and 5 fanatics. I mean, 5 fanatics Relentless Company. There's a lot of tricks you can do. Maybe the meta. This is kind of a meta thing, right? Maybe the meta shifts with the Dark Elves and stuff towards more elf-based armies. So if Dark Elves have become super popular, or fighty Saurian or Sylvan Elves, 5 fanatics is no joke, and those armies are not happy to play against fanatics sometimes, because if you run through them, or put them in front of somebody and they have to charge through you, that's a lot of expensive elves potentially getting pummeled by fanatics, is what I'm saying. So 6 trolls. It should be 375 for this unit, not 360, but still, they're distracting, they're annoying, they require your general's leadership again. If your general's gone, this becomes a pain in the ass. Got to be careful with that. Another reason to kind of shift towards maybe the safer general. But the spider hero can go in here too. But just 375, just do the math. They beat a lot of monsters, they beat a lot of units, and they're just annoying. They're just one of those units that, like, if you shove up in front of somebody, sometimes people just don't have answers for them, because they kill cowboys, they're good versus knights. If you charge a knight bus in because of the region and distracting, you might only get a couple wounds in, and then they spit back and kill 2 or 3, 4 maybe, and hold, and then you're just kind of shit out of luck. They work well with idols because the reroll ones is very nice for them. Yeah, they're just a cool unit to try. They don't score, but whatever. We'll see how they work out. 8 Ed Bashers. I switched to common orcs, even though my general was frenzy. So I need this unit to hold my general versus like a lot of shooting and stuff. The trolls also create a nice unit for the general if the enemy doesn't have a lot of things that can get to him, because I don't know, because they need his leadership anyway, and he can kind of be a little more forward with them because they can take a lot of charges and he can just whack at things as well. So I actually think that creates a really strong unit. But if he needs a bunker, the common orcs with the shields, oh my god, I've loved this so much more than the frenzy ones, because if you're going to have 10 guys with frenzy and be on the 320 points, sure, be on, go on the flank, take your Ed Bashers with paired weapons, or whatever, and just go crazy. But when he was in the unit, and I have to be more central and kind of defensive, people would just shoot like bows at him, because it's one of the best targets in the army. Do you want to shoot the 75 goblins, the resilient 8 great green idols, or do you want to shoot the 4 save toughness 4 Ed Bashers? Right? And so they would just pummel my unit. It's one of my scoring units too. And I would just get pummeled by like magic missiles and stuff. And there'd be like 2 left. So not only am I not safe versus cannons then, but I'm losing a scoring unit. So the 2-up save just takes a lot of like fireballs and makes it just not a clean target to shoot. And you're going to take the frenzy check anyway, but also it's even better then, because a lot of times if he's charging with the unit, you don't want the unit to die and give up res. You kind of want to just shock troop it and let your Omen guy kill a bunch of guys. So I definitely have not missed being the frenzy version. I do think if you're going to play this unit without a character in it, I would go the frenzy ones and just say I'm a 300-point unit that does 20 strength, 5 attacks on a charge, and I don't give a shit. And then you don't have to worry about panic. Orc Chariots, 2 here. Not much to say about them. I gave a reason in another video why I like them over Goblin Chariots. They're little missiles. They work well with idols. They can fit in gaps. They are leadership 7. They don't panic from all the goblins around them. So you can set up like fleas where your goblins run through them and they don't give a shit. You don't have to worry if your goblin hero dies next to them or your fast cav. And at the same time, they're very tough but expendable. They're only 145 and they can cause some hurt for sure. There's always this thing in mind. They're 290. For 290, you can get almost a giant. If you could find 25 points in this list, you can almost get a giant for those points. And so, which is better, 1 giant or 2 chariots? A giant's a little more self-sufficient. It can be steadfast. It's faster. It's more maneuverable. And it's more annoying. Like, right, when a chariot doesn't charge, it blows. Right? It sucks. If it doesn't charge, it sucks. While a giant is kind of the opposite, where you can get charged, take some wounds, and then fight back. So there is something to be said here for if a giant is a better play than a chariot. I don't know where I would find 25 points in this list particularly because I just found points for the Binding Scroll. Uh, but it's something to consider. I will say that. I'm definitely, it's not out of the question for that. Maybe if the Lord got cheaper somehow. Nonetheless, this is the current build, has 2 chariots, and I have enjoyed them. A fast cav unit, I do got to get better about keeping it alive. And 2 idols. I think idols are super strong. They have 2 very good buffs. One is reroll ones all the time, which is super sweet with all the chariots, the trolls, the head bashers, the omen. It's kind of like a built-in spell, and you have 2 of them, so it's pretty easy to get the aura where you need it. But also, when they fight, you get minimized leadership. There are times where, and this is where I think playing the army becomes a little more difficult, and you have to know what you're doing. You know, there are times where my idol is fighting, and he's near a unit that needs minimized leadership, and the order that you do the fight in is super important. I actually think planning not only where you're going to fight, but the order of fights that are going to happen is super important with orcs. Super important. There's times where I'm like, I know I'm going to lose my general this turn. I need to do this fight first because I need his steadfast leadership there, and then I can lose my general. Or I need to do the idle one second because I need my minimized leadership because my idol's near this other fight. Or maybe I got to do the idol first because once I pursue or overrun, I'll become within 6 inches of this other unit, so I'm going to get my reroll ones. Lots of little synergies like that. So yeah, that's the army. I told you some things that maybe I would change, or maybe I would consider. I think as long as you have a mounted lord, you kind of need the Ed Bashers. I think the hero setup is pretty sweet. Again, I'm starting to consider maybe more safer warlord builds. I still think you need like a nice tanky leadership 9 cowboy. I think as a cowboy, he's very important or very good. I think you can start to minimize some of the risks if you were to take an Iron Orc with like a 1-up, 4-up, and not Omen. Omen Apocalypse just feels so good because, I mean, it just feels good because it's strength. He's just a million strength. But, I mean, if you went 1-up, 4-up, let's just do a build real quick. Let's just see what we could do. Actually, let's just build a new one. How much would it... Let's just see what it would look like. So you don't need a shield, right? So how much does this guy cost? If you go just Death Cheater. So if you go just Death Cheater, you have 4-up base for plate, bore. You have a 1-up save whether you have 2 hand weapons or not, right? So in theory, you could take this guy with a great weapon, and he would be 50 points cheaper. Now he doesn't have the same. He's 1-up, 4-up versus 3-up, 5-up. He's bad versus fire, but you just accept that. And he has 5 strength 7 instead of 4 strength 7 instead of Omen Apocalypse. Weighs 4 strength 8 to run, which has D3 extra attack. So he's not as fighty by any means. He's not going to one-shot a lot of things like the other guy does. But he's 50 points cheaper. He's not frenzied, which has its own advantages. And there's, I mean, it's 40. I'm over core because I remember that. So he's 45 points cheaper. I mean, you could say paired weapons is actually really nice on him too. I actually think paired weapons is a little bit better on orcs than great weapons at time because if Kingslayer could be on not on foot only again, I actually think that it would be super nice here. But Shady Shankins is pretty good too. Lightning reflexes, lethal strike, and magical attacks, and reroll to fail in duels. Like, this guy is 5 points cheaper. Because you don't need a shield. Like, I think there's something to be said for these 2 warlords. One being, like, I think one or the other. Like, this is like the man... This is like the man mode. But, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just feel like how much of this army depends on leadership. I could see you saying, you know what? I don't want to be, I can't afford, and you could do Lucky Charm on him, I guess, if you could find 5 points. you might say, you know what, that's just too much for me. That's just too much for me. You know, the army does enough without this guy being a million strength 7 attacks, because a lot of times it's almost like I'll say you're almost being desperate. I actually hate the frenzy check. I'm starting to think that maybe this is the better version, this guy down here, or some version where he's not frenzied, but is immune to psych. You do want that, because there are points where you don't want him out there getting caused by fear and stuff like that. And he's just so tanky. Resilience 6 is great and all, but this guy's bad against lethal strike. The other guy's actually a lot better against lethal strike because he's immune to lethal strike. And he has a ward save and not a. But whatever. I mean, shit happens. You're just not good against lethal strike. Just deal with it. That being said, the rest of the list is pretty cool and pretty sweet in and of itself. So it's a high risk, high reward style. You have to be on point with your leadership ranges and your BSB ranges and your movement. If anyone's watched me play it, you'll know. You have seen it in action at least, but yeah, no, definitely give this list a try. I think for now we'll just say without this one, you're gonna need a warlord on a boar probably. Give this list a spin. It's pretty sweet. It's pretty sweet, I'd say, and I've had very successful results for very good people with it. I'm really excited to see how the trolls do. Anyway. That's my video. Thanks for listening.